Are we ready to go, Tom, over there? Okay. It's 6 o'clock, and so we want to get started with our City Council work session for May 22nd, 2025. And where the mayor has turned the budget over to the City Council, we'll turn the time over now to our Mayor Pro Tem, Ryan Smith, for the remainder of the meeting.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, we are gathered here today. Budget parts today, we were going to go over was, we have today was you fleet, that's right, fleet and okay, so Derek, are you
From a
giving
fleet perspective, though?
Tom is? Okay. Tom's double duty in today, and we're grateful for taking care of that. Usually has such great slides and everything. Yes. Numbers by Tom Cotter.
All right, so I have looked just to give you kind of an update. I haven't seen any numbers pop up yet from the county on the truth and the property tax system for the state. Our IT,
They usually get those in June-ish.
usually they're supposed to be getting them in kind of like right now. Hopefully they come up quickly. I forgot that I had to log in. I'm confused. That was the other issue. Out.
Guess we say he wasn't. It was a lawnmower. I thought he could make it. He put the face out. So.
See if my closed captions are on. Oh. They're in the fleet fund this year. I don't know what I've done for it not to pop all the way up, but all right. So this is what we're going to talk about tonight. Is a lot about our fleet fund. So in the world of accounting, which I know is super exciting, we have what's called an internal service fund, and that's what we utilize for our fleet services and our facility fund. The whole point of these is to really think of it as like it operates like a business within inside the city. Charging departments for the cost of using and maintaining vehicles. There's a couple benefits of why we feel this is a good thing to do. It helps improve accountability. It has centralized all of our maintenance. There's stabilized funding. Allows us to plan for the life cycle of the vehicles. And just so the council is aware, and again, a lot of this is for those individuals that the council may or may not be aware of how the fleet fund operates. A lot of this too is we thought about, okay, if I'm a citizen and tuning in, or later on and I see this stuff, someone who didn't have maybe the knowledge that the council would have of what is the fleet fund, why do we have it, why are we talking about it? Well, that's why kind of laying the groundwork right now. So the council's aware, the fleet fund or fleet services staffed by a fleet manager, a shop supervisor, and 2 automotive mechanics. And they all work underneath the direction of the Public Works Assistant City Administrator is what their umbrella they are. So we have a pretty experienced team that works down there, and we're lucky to have them. Why? Why do we use a fleet fund? What's the advantage to it? We feel that it does save taxpayer money. Having those resources in-house, it avoids those costly markups that one can experience at an auto dealership or auto repair. Allows them to be fast. It lets us prioritize vehicles that need attention immediately, especially when we talk about our emergency fleet. We can't have those sitting sidelined for a long time. Really, okay, I think the mayor walked you guys through this slide. If it looks familiar, it's because it should, during his budget presentation of how does the fleet fund actually work. So for an existing vehicle that resides inside Brigham City, the fleet fund owns it. They're the owner of it. So like, again, back to the view them as a business inside the city. So they own the police vehicle. They own that F-150. They have bought it. The fleet fund bought it. And then they are going to have a lease payment to the police department. So each year in the annual budgeting process, the police department receives those lease payments, the lease expense from our fleet fund. So the general fund, the fund we're going to focus on tonight is the general fund. So this applies for everyone. The electric, water, airports, golf, all of those are operating underneath the same parameters, the same rules. We go in, we assign those numbers out, the leases go out to the departments pay those leases back, and it's all over the life cycle of the vehicle. So if we say, hey, that police F-150 is going to operate for 5 years, just kind of a straight line in Councilmember Jensen's world, straight line depreciation. View it like that. And then by the time that 5 years is over, we take the money that the department has paid back, and we're able to go purchase a new vehicle. Obviously, there is the resale price as well of the vehicle. So the vehicles that we are selling that we've used in terms of things, we no longer need them. We sell those through the proper surplus channels. For a lot of these vehicles, it goes through the GovDeals website process. And that money that comes back, make sure the council's clear on this. If a police truck is sold and that money comes back into the fleet fund, it is not earmarked, tagged for a police vehicle purchase. Fleet fund's money, so it's the fleet fund to use how they would deem necessary. And I say they because the fleet fund has a fleet committee kind of recommending, sits on it, overviews a lot of purchases, and makes recommendations up to the council. So this is just over the last years. This is not talking about the lease program yet. This is just what expenses are really taking place inside the fleet fund. So really the two drivers are, as you can see, fuel and oil and parts and equipment. So each year we go through the budgeting process of, all right, the shop supervisor, the fleet manager, we get together and look at their budget as well, seeing this is what we need. And then we go through some accounting process to allocate out what they feel is going to be their fuel cost, their shop cost, their maintenance cost, and all those are allocated based on a previous year's actuals. So you can see that those costs, just in fleet inside itself, without talking about the lease program yet, those have been increasing over the last couple of years. Yeah.
So that doesn't include the capital projects.
Nope.
Separate.
It was just kind of, once again, giving a background of what fleet is, why we do it, and this is their O&M.
Just their
more.
operating.
Yeah. Yep. So I went and looked and said, all right, for the CPI, year over year, and I looked at December, so they do a 12-month look back and say, how much is the cost increasing for new vehicles and then gas? They call it motor fuel. So I went and looked. So the chart on the left kind of shows the percentages of the CPI increase for each one of those sectors. So you can see the giant spike 2021 that occurred with motor fuel. So a lot of times you see that spike and then you see it comes back down. Well, it jumped almost 50% in 1 year. And it came back down. That's just the year over year. So even though it came back down, when you look at the CPI of, okay, it was around 0, there wasn't an increase or a decrease, it's still at the 2021 level, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what I tried to capture on the charts to the right of showing, hey, and I just put numbers in there, just, okay, a new vehicle, if it costed $40,000 in 2017, per the CPI index, what would it cost in 2024? And so that, you can kind of see that it's gone up around $9,000 over that time period, so it's about 20% for a new vehicle. Gas, I just said, okay, let's say a gallon of gas costs me $2.50. What's it going to cost now? You can see those costs, how they're impacting inside a fleet, and now we're kind of move over to the new vehicle world. So what we're proposing inside the mayor's budget, as we went and looked at fleet, as I talked with Jason Ketsey, who oversees a lot of the fleet stuff, the concern is the fleet creep. You'll hear that term. As we talked about how we're recouping those costs inside our fleet fund, where we're making a lease payment, we're experiencing more and more that the issues of, we collected $50,000 through lease payments to go buy a new truck or a new vehicle. That truck is now $60,000, $70,000. And so we're having to use more and more of fleet savings. A lot of when we sell vehicles, that being dumped back into the fleet fund, those revenues, we're now using those to go and purchase vehicles. We're experiencing, we just don't have enough from the normal lease program to go and purchase the vehicles. So I picked 3 of kind of like the glaring examples of what the issue is.
Is that because the rent we're charging is on old lease?
Yep.
Enough to buy the next.
Yeah, so we base it off,
Covering our old cost.
the program had always been, hey, we're going to base it off what we know, not make an assumption, or I'll go through some of more of the kind of the math inside of it. We did have in there a 5% adder, but a lot of that was to help cover, it was more of an administrative, to cover wages and other things like that. It hadn't been designed that be necessarily to help offset fleet creep. But we'll work through that. So these are the 3 examples of kind of the.
So hang on. Let's say it's a $50,000 5 years, right? At the end of 5 years, we've recouped the cost of $50,000 because we've charged the department
Plus 5%.
A little bit more.
Per year.
And when we have to buy the new one, that just comes out of our capital project budget.
Comes out of the fleet budget. If it existed there, then it's still in fleet.
If it's a replacement.
Yeah. The only time it comes from capital project or a department budget is if it's a new vehicle. If it's something that didn't exist previously inside the fleet fund, the city that department go and purchase the vehicle by really transferring the funds over to the fleet fund. The fleet fund makes the purchase, and then they start the lease program with them. So, for example, one of the more recent examples is when we went to the animal control vehicle code enforcement / with Officer Tarver. That vehicle didn't exist inside the fleet previously. So we went and purchased that. The police department, through the capital project fund, transferred that money to the fleet fund. The fleet fund then purchased the vehicle, and away we go. There's not.
So when we have our vehicle, the rent or the lease out to collect it all, and we have to buy a new one and we're short, where are we getting that money?
It's from the fund balance that resides inside the fleet fund. You're selling a vehicle because that's the $50,000 vehicle, and this is something. Let's say police has paid back all the $50,000, and we sell it, and we get $10,000, $6,000. That money then just goes back into the fleet fund, not necessarily tagged for police, but for the new vehicles that come through. So how it works every year is, so we go through, we figure out how much of a lease payment that the fleet fund will be receiving from all of the different departments. We go and look and say, all right, all the departments inside the city, fleet fund is going to receive 1.5, making this number completely up. We're going to receive $1.5 million in lease revenue. We then have requests from different departments of new vehicles that are, replacement vehicles that are needed. Fleet committee meets, they talk with the departments, they rank them. You'll see that inside your budget packet. And we put a line on there of 1.5 million. Hey, this is where it is. This is how much you have to go get new vehicles this year. And that is how it operates from a year-to-year basis. So what we have found is that $1.5 million number was leaving us significantly short in our need to replace, specifically inside of public safety. It was causing concern. We met and we talked about, okay, do we create a separate fleet for public safety? Jason Ketzbeaver talked about, it's not just them, like garbage trucks, another huge issue. We talked about many different issues that were occurring inside of fleet. So you can see, like, these are examples. And the fire truck is one example we've used. That was 20 years from one to one, but you can look at the year. In 1 year, we had a 43% increase in that engine cost, and it is the exact same engine. Inside the garbage truck,
had the bad axle on the back of it too.
Does the new one have a better axle on the back end of it? Or?
Yeah. So that you can look inside the garbage world as well, like those numbers that are increasing there. So you got 2017, if you look at, okay, well, I had a 3% increase from 17 to 18. We can handle that. That's okay. The issue becomes when you look in that 23 world, where you start to see those drastic jumps. Well, 2017, we bought a garbage truck for $240,000. In this year's budget, it is $450,000. So 9 years, 10 years, again, round up, let's make it easier. $200,000 is what we're talking about. That is what is causing the issue inside fleet. It's not insolvent. It's not broke. There are funds there. We just looked and said, hey, as we're progressing, as the fleet of the city, we've made the decision of this is the rotation we're going to be on because of maintenance costs, other issues that exist with older equipment. This is what we're going to be doing. You can kind of see those are the examples. So, then all right, let's show you how go inside the mayor's budget. I have a better screen on this one.
That 5% is not enough then? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah, that's what it's increased. Tom's going to show you that.
So right now I picked it an F-150. That is what the police department is using. The vehicle's around $55,000. Upfit for it, which is the lights, radios, everything that is needed for it to go and do what a police officer needs to do, is $25,000. Really, the cost of that F-150 is $80,000. We anticipate it to be around for 5 years. That's its useful life. When the world we operate inside the fleet fund, we put it into months, 60 months. Currently, there is no inflation adjustment that exists inside of the fleet fund. So, if we were just to do a straight line depreciation of the $80,000 over 5 years or 60 months, it's that $1,300 number. That's what we would need if it was just straight line. Currently, we put in a 5% admin fee, and that's strictly to help cover the cost of wages and other things that take place inside of fleet. The slide I showed earlier regarding kind of the fuel and the other things, but really the admin was to cover wages. That was its intent, as wages increase. So over the 60 months, 5 years, the total that would be paid back by the police department currently is $84,000. So I said, okay, I made up a term, fleet recovery margin, $4,000. 5%. That was kind of what was happening. As we met and talked as a fleet committee, and as I talked with Mr. Ketzever a lot, we said, okay, we're seeing this fleet creep. It's happening. We're seeing it. We've talked with the council before about state contract pricing really going away. It exists, but it used to be a significant savings for municipalities that these dealers, manufacturers would offer governments, local governments, pretty significant break in vehicles. Some of them have flat out just got rid of that program. Now we're not doing it anymore. Others participated in it still, but it's nowhere near what it had been. And the state does that for us. They have a cooperative purchasing agreement that we're allowed to use. We go through that process. But anyway, back to the story. Jason and I thought, you know what? What if we just, not what if we just, but 2%. We're seeing across the board, like there are some we looked at before, huge increases over a year. Some have stayed fairly normal in ranges that we could handle. If we were to just go across the board, 2% per year, how would that work? So in this case, so if we were to do an inflation adjustment for this F-150, it'd be a 0.2% monthly inflation over the 5 years. Really, we're going to a 10% inflation adjustment over 5 years. And that now means the inflation adjusted cost is $88,000. We're going to do the same thing. Straight line, put that 5% admin in to help with the wages. My fleet recovery margin is now $12,400, giving me an additional $8,400 to go help with fleet creep. How does it work with an existing vehicle? I went and picked an ambulance. This one's a little more messy. So what we did was we talked about, hey, we anticipated to have this ambulance here for 10 years. Well, it's now got 3 years left. When we go and added in our 20% inflation adjusted number for this, it's giving you 10 years. I said 20, 10 years.
Yeah, 10.
So it's double. So there's going to be a 20% inflation adjustment taking place on this
In its last 3 years.
And so the problem is we looked at this, we said, okay, how do we do this fairly? What's the best way to do this? How do we, ambulance, you now have $38,000, $39,000 that I need to get from you in 3 years. Is that fair? Is that the best thing? We kind of picked 3 years as the number. But hey, anything that's got two or fewer, we're not going to hammer them, for lack of a better term. So that is what we went and did. So on this one, you can see over on the current cost, the lease payment that was coming back to city fleet fund, yeah, $671. Now it's going to come back $1,745. So it's $1,000 more for the last 3 years to go recoup that $38,000. That's why during the mayor's presentation, he talked a lot about this is driving the cost inside of public safety. It's specifically inside the fire and ambulance world because of that inflation adjusted cost being allocated over a shorter time period. Where these things normally have 10 years to do the whole payment, now we're saying in some cases they have 8 years or whatever, but there are large pieces of equipment that are 3 years, that it's a pretty significant number for it to pick up. So how it works overall inside like a department?
Back up just real quick on that one, Tom. But if you look at this ambulance individually, specifically, I believe, if I'm right, this is the ambulance that was totaled about a month ago.
It is.
So, you know, ambulance totaled. We did receive a insurance check for that ambulance, which was about $20,000 less than what we paid for it, which I was actually pretty happy about.
Yeah.
What I'm not happy about is the new ambulance that replaced this ambulance cost the city about $385,000. So that, you know, if you look at the real life example of what we're trying to deal with here, is we replaced a $184,000 ambulance about 7 years later with a $380,000 ambulance. But I mean, that's why we're having this whole conversation.
And to Derek, Mr. Euler's point there, so really, even if you were to go and look, if you just look at that inflation adjusted total cost, that's it right below that blue number. So how this program works, hey, the 184,091, we're really going to get paid. I guess look at the total paid back. We're going to pay back 232,000 in this system. So with what Derek just talked about, we're still short $120,000, $150,000 for this piece of equipment. So that's why there are some vehicles that have a very significant gap. We close it. Other vehicles that are tighter. That's why, as the fleet committee met and discussed, we felt 2% per year helped overall. So inside the cemetery fund,
This doesn't affect anything that we already own and are leasing to the department.
it will.
It will?
Yep, that was, so this is an existing ambulance. That's the big change. We got to change it across the board. So if it's already there and you only have, so cost jumps by $38,000, I need that money to come into the fleet. There's only 3 years left on that ambulance's life. So they're going to have to pay $13,000.
Going to come out of their budget.
Yeah, and that is why we are asking for a tax increase inside the mayor's budget. Because the fleet fund, just for the general fund alone, the cost, it went up by over $400,000.
And we're increasing their budget over the years.
Yep.
We're increasing it. So that's my thinking along the right. I understand your question, but if that 2% inflator stays in, it doesn't go away. So that just stays there, and it'll continue on. What I honestly hope is we're not going to have to go to 3 or 4% over the next few years because of what's going on. We're really taking a stab at the 2% and hoping that's going to work and keep us moving forward with being able to make purchases in a timely manner of when our equipment's through its useful life. I think that I could probably use 2 big pieces of equipment that we have allowed to get past their useful life, frankly, because not enough money in the fleet fund was being generated in lease payments for purchase of new. Probably the worst example is fire truck, the old one. I mean, in about an 18-month period, we put about $95,000 into that truck to keep it on the road. It should have been replaced 2 years prior to that. The next kind of the biggest issues we have is if we don't have the money to replace our garbage trucks, they are extremely expensive to keep on the road when they're past their useful life. I mean, if somebody shows up to help us work on it, every single time, 20 or 30 grand gone. I mean, the goal here is to get that money right then so we can make those purchases when they're past their useful life, so we're not spending just more money keeping them on the road. So those funds, I mean, I don't know how to say this any other way, but that $92,000 we put into that fire truck to keep it on the road, you're flushing it down the drain. So,
What is your fleet fund now? What does that number look?
Which side?
Oh,
like we have about $20 million worth of vehicles inside the fleet fund. That's the
no. What do you set aside every year to buy vehicles? Do you have a dollar amount?
Yeah. So this year, as I talked about, so that line is right around 2.3 million.
every year? That's with the increase to
That's
2%.
this year, so that, it goes back to, so every year it changes, because we look at, say, all right, what lease payments do we have across the city that are coming back to the fleet fund? And that's what we use to go get the replacement vehicle. For this year, with the 2% inflation added adjustment, there's about $2.3 million in lease payment revenue coming to the fleet fund. And that is to go get new equipment, replacement equipment. So as the fleet committee meets with the departments and talks to them, the staff meets with them, they get the vehicle request list from departments. They go through, they present it to the fleet committee, and we rank them. Okay, this is the priority of the ones we're getting.
Dave, good question. So the current year budget that we're in, the budget that ends in June, that amount of money is $1.575 million, and the mayor's proposed budget is at $2.2 million. That's 2%. It's not 100% the 2% inflator, because there could be some movement, but that's essentially what we're asking the council to do with the tax increase, is that additional money's available for purchases. Tom will go through the details. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
No, you're good. So we can jump
One
around.
quick
Yeah.
question. So, the lease payments you get from the department, the vehicle, does that directly stay with that vehicle replacement?
No.
Or does
comes to
that department not know if they're even gonna get a new ambulance in 5 years? Up to the fleet committee, or
Yeah. So I mean,
it is just,
there-
it's just leasing it for the time, for what they have it,
correct.
right.
And
correct?
we meet. So I meet with the fleet supervisor, manager. We review all the vehicles inside the fleet fund every single year. We look at the useful life of, okay, is this vehicle still going to work for our useful life? A lot of times we actually push them out. Based on say, hey, I think that thing can make it 2 more years, 3 more years. So we're always adjusting. And answer to your question, Robin, is the lease money we get from the ambulance is not to go purchase a new ambulance on a yearly basis. But in theory, yes, it is. But in practice, no. Like,
Yeah, giving us the replacement and the
So,
inflation cost to replace.
if you go and look, so like
That's the theory of how to.
yeah, so
It's not necessarily.
yeah, so we're getting a lease payment back right now for the fire truck, the new fire truck. We have to make the payment, the loan on it, but we're also taking some of that to go buy, contribute to a backhoe lease, contribute to mowers, the different.
The time period, if on those lease payments, are they set up for a specific time period?
It is over the useful life of the vehicle. So we feel like we have a pretty good idea when we go and buy. The example here I was going to show you is, so here's the cemetery. So we purchased a lawnmower in 2011. That time we felt like, hey, it's probably going to last 10 years. So we were anticipated to replace it in 2021. That was sometimes we don't hit things perfectly. So it is fully paid for. Lease payments have stopped because the cemetery is still using it. It's still up there. It's still being used. So you can see, like, when you look over to the side, like, there is no payment for a lot of their vehicles because other ones, like the sprayer that was bought in 2013, we thought, hey, it's probably going to need to be replaced in 2017. We still have it, still using it. So it's not an exact science, but we feel it's fair. It's actually, the departments are paying for their usage of the fleet vehicles. So you can see inside the cemetery what, apparently this didn't get pulled over. This actually shows a 1% increase. So you can see up here in the corner, I was playing with this chart. So just double it. So you can see what it's going to do. So this column here shows, hey, if there had not been an inflation, holy cats, adjusted number is going to be $5,080 is the monthly payment that was gonna come from the cemetery to the fleet fund. With a 1% adjustment, it's now 5,732. So you can figure 650 more bucks, 2% adjustment is gonna take place. And so this number here, this is showing inside the general fund. Why are we having the discussion we're having about a property tax? And it's because of, so this shows fiscal year 24, fiscal year 25, which is the one we're in now. And this fiscal year 26, the lease payment. And then the very last column shows the delta between 26 and 20. You can see the main driver is fire, streets, those departments. Ambulance is having a kicker there. So there are things that are happening, this is the annual, that are happening that because of fleet creep and other things, we felt appropriate to go and request inside the mayor's budget a property tax increase to help fund that fleet creep. So you can see over the years who's really made up the lease payments inside the general fund, and it's going to be, you can see it right there, it's your public safety. And then you have the streets department, parks department, pretty close behind. But it is overwhelmingly public safety.
Question, I'll go back to the charts,
Where am I going?
back where you were, you know.
Sorry, my screen's faster than up there. That's the problem. This one?
Yeah, that one. So once we've repaid what we expected, and we don't make the lease payments anymore.
Yeah, but we really try to not have that happen. We always want there to,
Right, we want to.
we'll adjust the useful life just so because the problem is that we bring on a new piece of equipment and they stop the lease payment, the department's gonna have a can have a fairly large increase in their lease payment.
You don't want a department to have,
We don't want to have a big jump in their lease payment.
with the year, obviously we're building this budget and the mayor's budget all at the same time, and then we go through that upcoming year's fleet purchases. So if we go through that as a staff and see, hey, here's the total, we'll go through and look at useful life left. And we're really looking at anything that's, 2-3 years. If we know we're not going to make that purchase, we will go make a manual adjustment to that lease payment to make sure that department continues to make at least some small lease payments, so you don't see it all of a sudden.
Because instead of a 2028 mower, we're getting a 2030 mower.
Well, and it's
Because
really
we're good on two
It's
lots
really
here.
just so,
We have a
we-
higher price.
it's really so we just keep a payment in the department so they don't have a drastic shift in their budget.
Yeah, that was my next question. So on the, if it's outlived its useful life and they don't have that in their budget, they still spend it on something else? You lower their budget because they don't have that lease payment?
Yeah, so I think it's a really good question. The fleet and facility allocations to the departments are, just to be honest with you, are not controlled by the department heads whatsoever. They're told this is what your payments are. They're done by finance every year. So
At least I get.
So a department head can't come in, I mean, if they're making a lease payment on such a big purchase, like fire engine or whatever, and he's more than paid it, Brigham City lets fire trucks go 25 years,
20.
20 years. But and I don't remember the exact numbers on how you figured out the lease payment. So you're saying that will be adjusted once the cost of that vehicle, that initial cost?
So when we initially put the
Will
truck
be
into the
adjusted?
fleet fund, we put it in as 20 years. And then as we get farther down the line, as we meet with fleet, as we look and say, okay, we're approaching, we've had it now for 15 years. As we meet with fleet, they say, we think it's gonna last 2 more years beyond what we originally estimated. So we'll put that into the system. It doesn't change the value, it just allows the spread of that, of the remaining, whatever is left from the original purchase, the fair market value, if we're talking depreciation. It then says, okay, there's $50,000 left. I now have, instead of 8 years or 5, let's just do 5 and 10. So if there's 50,000 left, in straight math, 5 years originally, we got to pay 10 grand a year. But if we meet with fleet and fleet says, I think there's 5 more years left there before we sell or before we immediately replace it, we're now taking 50 divided by 10. So it's going to lower their lease payment to 5. Does that make sense? So we do that calculation. And the case that Derek and I were talking about was we try to make sure that the department has something. We really don't like the zeros from the finance side. The departments love it. But it's because we know when we buy that new piece of equipment, it's going to be more. And we want to make sure that they had something there. And that part, it also helped with the, why do we have some money available to go purchase other equipment, but it's not a huge amount. Like when we go and adjust those, we're not talking significant. They're minor at all. But I was trying to pull up.
I think the question, Robin, if do we ever artificially make adjustments to lease payment amounts for maybe inflationary or something? The answer to that's no. The payments back from the departments are always exactly what the city paid for it. The fleet fund paid for it, plus the adder. Yes. Yep. And the adder is the 5% that's been built in since this thing was put in place, which predates me and Tyler by a long ways. This was in place, I don't know, 20, 25 years.
The lease payment is broken up 5 years, 10 years
Yeah.
for that, the cost.
It's whatever the life
Whatever we
cycle is, yes.
Okay.
It's 100% of the value. So spent $830,000 on our last fire truck. It's a 20-year life cycle. That is put in, the fire department will pay the fleet fund back whatever $830,000 plus the, if you guys approve this, 7% adder instead of 5. It's always been historically there over a 20-year period. In years 17, 18, and 19, when we get there on that piece of equipment, if we are planning to buy a new fire truck right then, we'll leave it at that original life cycle. If we are looking at that and say, you know what, this thing's going to go 4 more, 5 more years, we'll go adjust that life cycle just 1 or 2 years right at the end to try to time it when you actually make the purchase, so that money continues to flow to the fleet fund every year. You don't have you guys look at the chart. So here's the historical cost of police. Here's the historical cost of fire. We're trying to not do this. Actually, it's going to be this and then this because of a lease payment. We're trying to keep that level. And obviously, when you're looking at those types of purchases on an $830,000 vehicle, you can see a ginormous jump in a budget year over year just because of that lease payment.
So I went and grabbed the cemetery. So this is the spreadsheet that I'll sit down and go through with fleet. I just pulled up the cemetery because it's manageable. It shows different vehicles. It does show some that have a 0 lease payment. So I've now put the correct inflation adder up here, 2%. So we can talk the Kubota spreader right here. So it was purchased during this budget year that we're currently in. So it's a new piece of equipment that's coming on in next year's budget. So when we bought it, It cost us $4,270. We anticipate it to be here for 15 years. What that means in this world of what we're proposing inside the mayor's budget is that it's now having a 30% inflation adjusted number. You get 2% per year. So hey, the inflation adjusted number now becomes 5,551. So as we go through the whole chart, what does that mean? What does it look like? So if we didn't have that 2% in there, the monthly lease payment for the Kubota spreader from the cemetery to the fleet fund would be $25. With that 2% adder, inflation adder, it's now 33. Difference $8. So from the cemetery standpoint, you can go through and look at the different equipment. So on a backhoe lease, we only do those once a year. I know I said we had the rule of 3 and other. On the lease ones, we put the adder in there because we felt like there's a very good chance when we go to the lease next year, we're not getting it for 20. They're also going to have, they should adjust the number. So let's go ahead and capture that. So,
By the way, the backhoes are the only piece of leased equipment the
that's
city
it.
has. So that the departments are paying the exact cost of that yearly lease. We just pass it right through. So we do not own our backhoes. There's 5 of them in the city. They're a straight lease.
So at the end of the day, for the cemetery fund, cemetery department, sorry. Their yearly lease payment had been that. We're now going to go over to this for about $15,000. That is what that 2% inflation adjusted number does for. You could play around with that. I mean, cemeteries could.
That difference has been added into their budget,
It is inside the mayor's budget currently.
for each department has that addition.
Yeah. So that exists. So we're talking general fund tonight because that's really why we proposed, the mayor proposed, the tax increase is because of the impact it was having on the general. It is occurring also in the utility fund, at water, electric, sewer, garbage. We showed an example from earlier. It is happening across the city. It's just inside the general fund. And a lot of it has to do with some of the sales tax numbers we're seeing inside the general fund. In the mayor's budget, we held that number steady. We're not seeing the increases that we had experienced over the last couple of years of sales tax. We looked at different revenues. Where we landed, unfortunately, was property tax to cover the fleet charges being sent over to the general fund. You can see really quick. So even if you put cemetery fund, it's about $650. So you can see as you change that number, what happens to the inflation adjusted number. Yeah, what do you got, Councilmember Jensen?
How bad off is the fleet fund? I mean, if we had to afford our lease.
I think pull up the priority list.
So that's I want to clarify the misnomer of short. Because of how I'm not sharing the right.
I said short, I'm okay with
all it would do, how the fleet fund operates again. So we go and say, these are the lease payments that are coming in from the different departments.
I'm going to share that or put it in
Bigger, yeah,
presentation
sorry.
mode.
We have, because of the 2% inflation adjusted number, $2.3 million in lease revenue to go and buy new equipment, new replacement. When I say replacement, it's already existing inside the fleet fund. If that 2% did not exist, the number would come up about 1.6-ish, if I remember right, where we'd end up. we'd have to cut off, kind of, we'd be stretched to go get the garbage truck. We probably have to reshuffle some things to go get the garbage truck. Then you look above and you're like, okay, what am I going to reshuffle? And that's the problem we were facing. Because Fleet is saying, hey, that hook truck, I got to have it.
But you're asking,
It's replacing a 2008 piece of equipment that is well beyond its use.
I get that, but now you're asking the residents of Brigham City to have their property tax increases so we can buy, is the term, but new toys. That's that's what I'm getting out last week. Is because, and I get they only see a part of it. We all, and especially all of you guys here, this is your job. This is what you deal with. Sometimes our task to try to answer it on behalf of the city, and it's a tough one to sit there and raise property taxes 15% because we need to buy a new dump truck. I understand it. I get the lease fleet. I totally understand what you're trying to do. But my question, is there any other way to do it without raising property taxes at 15%? Whatever that number was. Wasn't it 15?
Yeah, so I think, for me to answer that question, there absolutely is other ways to do it. You know, if the fleet purchases that you see are the priority, and obviously, you know, Tom's showing you the list there, but, you know, Councilmember Smith talked in our budget work session the other day about the transfer from the utility fund. That's historically been at 15%. 2 years ago, we dropped it to 12. So this is the third consecutive budget that the council or the mayor's given to the council that's got a 12% transfer from the utility fund, and that would generate, remind me, Tom, about yeah, so if you went back to the 12% where we'd been for many, many years, started from 12 to 15%, about another 400,000 there. And obviously doing that takes 400,000 out of utility fund capital projects immediately. We're gonna have to go find a utility fund capital project and dump it.
Let me ask you this question then. Knowing all of the residents that are coming into Brigham City this year, just recently, and it's still happening with all the new development going on, new houses, people are constantly moving in. I understand that private tax doesn't hit us right now. So can this or part of this be moved to next year? Have you forecasted what your property taxes could look like in the 2026 budget, knowing that we will get an increase? You let property taxes alone this fiscal year. The next fiscal year, do you anticipate what that growth revenue would be just based on the extra residents coming in? My question would be, is there a way to take a smaller hit this year, knowing that we're going to recoup things for next year? Can some of these projects be put on hold for one more year?
In answer to the question, have I forecasted a year from now what the property tax revenue there would be? I have not. But if you look at the residents, the new growth we're seeing is mostly residential. You can figure we're going to get $300 to $400 off a home. So if you look at I need $400,000. 6,000 homes. I need 10,000.
We have about 75 in the city now. So that, yeah.
I mean, that's just the math.
7,500 total.
Residential growth will not cover costs.
You might have 100.
And that's,
Yeah, no, I understand. I know that, Tom.
it's through the, you know, it's the roads. It's the
I'm just trying to figure out how to not do a 50% property tax increase.
No, I get it. Like that is the issue that we talked with Mayor Bott nauseam about. And it's just a priority of, I mean, really, we built in a 2% adjustment, inflation. I don't know why I can't say inflation matter if the council feels like, hey, really, right now, we can handle 1%. The council feels like the adder isn't going to work.
This is, I mean,
that's
the increase you're proposing. It's going forward, it's just forward-looking, how much we think we might need in the fund going forward. I think, Councilman Jeffrey, what if we lowered that or kind of somewhere in the middle instead of, is that an option?
Yeah, I absolutely think it's an option to drop the tax increase down some and just kind of try to meet in the middle, and we can adjust some other revenue numbers. I will say, and I did say it again, I'm gonna repeat it. Historically, 2%, if you look at the last 7 years, we're asking the council for 2%. We've been double that. So I think I need to publicly say we're kicking the can still. We know that. Because we're going to be back here a year from right now saying, this is where we went, this is what we did, this is what we're seeing. So that, maybe I'm dead wrong and the cost of vehicles somehow goes the other way, but I'm not sure it's going to.
That was in preparing for this, even preparing as we talk budgets, like try to go and get all the information you can. We talked as the council as the tariffs were being implemented and proposed. What we were hearing from state contract folks was a story we had never heard before. Previously, we've always had the ability, state contract kind of opens up before we've officially adopted a budget. And we've always kind of purchased contract. We've entered into agreements with Ford, and yeah, get them coming. Because the understanding was, hey, if the council were to say no, we could go to Ford and say, hey, we're no longer able to do that. Ford would say, no problem. We have plenty of other people that would like these. There was no harm, no foul. This year, Ford came and said, we're no longer doing this. If you agree, if you say right now to move, you're locked in. You're not out. And then they said, I need you to give me the answer this week, because next week are when the tariffs are going to hit. And they were forecasting anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 per vehicle that impact would have happened. So that's still kind of the world we're residing in.
I think the other thing too that's kind of interesting, council's got me thinking, I don't know exactly how long our internal service fund has been set up and operated this way, but it's north of 20 years. And that's kind of an interesting concept. This is the first time in 20 years that we've asked the council to make a major change to our internal service fund. That 5% adder, and it's been working for 20 years. That's, I'm going to kind of contradict what I said a second ago. For 20 plus years, that 5% and everything we've been able to manage, it's worked. And we're kind of to a spot now where it's just not working anymore. Is that 2% going to get us through the next 5 to 10? It might, honestly. But I also got to say, we might have to go to 4. So, that's who knows? And that's a difficult decision.
Are we running the complete fleet department, the employees and replacement and gas and everything off those lease payments? Or do they get
they get
a
gas,
separate amount
gas
from
and
the general
maintenance
fund?
is a separate allocation.
Not from the general fund. So the employees, the fuel, the time, all the parts to fix everything. If you go through your budgets, if you look at your budgets in every single department of the city, there's 2 lines or 9,000 level numbers at the very bottom. 2 numbers that go to fleet. One of them is a lease payment. One of them is essentially operation and maintenance. So if our guys change oil on Tyler's vehicle, Tom's vehicle tomorrow, the time that's put into that, the amount of money, that is a direct allocation to Tom's department the following month in an allocation. So it's a true internal service fund. Everything they do is 100% passed on to the cost of the department that is leasing that piece of equipment. So,
Okay.
And so when we go through the budget process, so like during the year, they're hit with the actual. Hey, we changed Mr. Cooper's oil. This is the cost. During the budget, we say, All right, fleet department, how much do you think we're gonna have to spend for oil, for the parts and all that stuff? Fuel. Then we go and look historically, the past actuals that have come in. What was that allocation percentage to the different departments? Your budgets are based off of historical actual. You say, hey, of everything that was fleet, 10% of it landed in electric. And I'm just making all these up. So of what we're getting from the fleet, 10% of those operating costs are going to be allocated to electric. The lease payments we know. Hey, this is the actual, but what you're seeing in your budget, that is what is going to, that is the actual payment that's going to happen inside that department. Whereas on the maintenance side, it may be a little, their estimates.
Is the tax increase
The lease part.
the least part, not
Yep.
on the increase?
It is that number right there. And that,
So that
that,
increase
this is
in
straight
gas and everything is already hitting the
Yep.
department,
hitting and covered and
the maintenance, already
correct.
in the department.
Yep.
We don't have any part of the tax increase gonna help cover that cost?
No, that is already budgeted for and covered inside the mayor's existing budget without the tax increase. The tax increases great for that number there. I mean, we put 450, kind of the number we put in. But really the number coming from the additional lease, the 2%, 406,000.
On the proposed, this is jumping to a different question, or topic.
No, you're good.
The proposed tax increase, how much is that gonna be per household, average?
We didn't have that one ready for you tonight.
Yeah, I was trying to think quickly in my head if I could do it, but without I mean, I could get an estimate together, but yeah, I better not answer that without knowing the numbers and.
Sorry, I should have. It's 10% on just the Brigham City portion. So that's gonna be. Did you anticipate what your?
If you just
Or
did
the
it straight
forecast
across,
rate.
so let's say, okay, $300 is the normal 15%, away you go.
It'd be about $30 a year
$30, $40
on
a
the
year.
average size home.
I think my.
But again, that's a very back of the napkin.
I'm just curious how much it's gonna hit each.
I would imagine
each household.
Yeah.
You had a
For the average
combination.
home, $40 would, I think I did that inside. I mean, let me go look.
I think it's in the mayor's
I was
presentation.
like, I think that's
Yeah.
actually there. Let me go look. Oh, you're fine.
Had a combination of at least transfer. The ramifications of something like. Yeah, I think there's a couple options there. I think first thing you do is take a look at the utility fund capital projects. Say, hey, here's 200,000 we can go get here. Take the other 200,000 decrease in revenue property tax and balance budget. So that's really where you'd be looking. Obviously, we've got some difficulties with capital projects in the utility funds because, remind the council, we've got an interest-only payment on a new issuance of a bond until our old bond's paid off in the 2027 budget year. So we're taking it, and we knew we were, but we're lower on what we should be spending, for the next 2 years in utility fund capital projects. And that's obviously we've got that interest-only payment for those first 2 years. So the 2017 bond pays off in 27.
That shows up in the capital
every year with that bond payment?
Bond payment, so in your budgets, you'll see bond payments budgeted, it's online in those, so with bond payments in the utility fund, you're gonna see them showing up in electric and water, and they're within those specific departments.
Only note I found inside Mayor Bott's budget presentation was we had anticipated to be around 15%, and that we would have a budget work session once the numbers came.
I remember the tough thing too is we're gonna see a new growth number, obviously.
And that's the council member Jeffrey's point.
Yep, and who knows, none of us know what it is. And by the way, depending on what we do with timing, you know, in future meetings, council may vote on the budget before we actually get the exact number. And then on a tentative budget, and then we'll get that and follow up through the truth and taxation public hearing and everything. So, but our next scheduled meeting is June 5th, and we most likely will not have a certified tax rate on June 5th, so we have to
Tentatively approved by, what are we doing on the night?
yeah,
We
we were gonna talk, see how the council felt. If you guys were comfortable adopting a tentative budget on June 5th, we would have everything ready for the council to do so, on the 5th of June. And then obviously, as long as we're continue with the truth and taxation, and you have till September 1st to adopt the final budget. That gives us some time, you know, to work through some things. And honestly, some of the conversations we're having tonight on, you know, hey, should we do this, that, or the other? You don't necessarily have to make that decision tonight or on June 5th. Move through the truth and taxation public hearing. You have till September to say, hey, this is what we're doing. So, correct me if I'm wrong, the council can come down, they can't go up.
Correct.
Yeah, so,
You can always come down.
yeah, so if the council is to adopt essentially the mayor's budget as the tentative budget, we would go through truth and taxation, have some public hearings in August. You can pull that down to whatever you want, clear till, you know, September 1st is what's in the state code. We just gotta adopt the final budget by September.
That's only we can only increase or decrease that line, that. We can only decrease the fleet vehicle replacement that we're putting our numbers towards
You
the
could-
increase.
The total budget number.
Yeah, it ties together. The only number that would
But
work,
we can't go and like decrease the budget somewhere else.
you could,
Yes.
And
because the number you're gonna
that's
change
the
is the
same.
number you're change is the property tax revenue. So if you were to decrease the property tax revenue, so if we go through the truth and taxation as and then the council felt like, hey, we want to lower that number, so that would just reduce the revenue coming into the general fund. So that's when you would make the decision, well, probably before then, but things we're talking about. Utility revenue transfer is just an expense reduction somewhere, whether it's the fleet or not. Is it, go look at the different revenues, fees, I mean,
The only thing that we would ask you as staff to not make any adjustments to would be the RDA and the MBA. Historically, we've done a final budget adoption in that June for those two. So anything else we can absolutely talk about. And I'm not necessarily saying you couldn't adjust an MBA and RDA, but it would be a budget adjustment essentially instead of a final budget adoption.
all right, so I went and looked. This is my home here in Brigham City. Last year's market value was $364,000. My Brigham City tax was $342. Isn't how it works, but let's just play with it. it became 15% increase, then becomes $393 to the $51 increase. I went from 342 to 390. If I received the full portion.
My head always goes to, if it gets there, it never goes down. Every time we bump up the electrical.
So I mean, Mayor Bott has spoke at that point numerous times. But I'm not going to speak for him, but it's a slide in the chart that what's in there. He feels passionate about it. Your exact point. Because once that number's there, and especially how the tax rate system works inside the state of Utah.
I thought we actually did lower them a few years ago when one of the bonds got paid.
Yeah, so that will happen if bonds get paid off, they get dropped. And even like, it's a GO bond. Right. You'll see a reduction if those bonds come off.
And try to add another one.
Who will? Us?
Sure that, and they'll just replace one with the other.
Oh, there's no them once we're out, they can't tax us.
I think, I think that'd be a great, just pass another bond. We can get out of that, where's our shortage for the whole year?
That's interesting. It's really close to the same number, isn't it?
Yeah. I think a couple things I was thinking is, adjusting the transfer to me doesn't really solve any problem. It just moves money from one pocket to the other. It doesn't increase our revenue and it doesn't cut our expenses. So the transfer, I don't think it's a big deal, relevant, moving the percentage up on that. I mean, I could be wrong if you guys see something else. The other thing is we've talked about small property tax increases each year instead of none for a few years and then going up 10 or 50% like we had a few years ago. I think we've talked about that in the past. I don't know how set everybody is on that, but I'm okay with a small property tax increase because it's been a plan, kind of like cost of inflation. How I look at it a little bit. So,
Yeah.
I don't have a number, but
I'd say that's a drastic change, but
You bring up,
that's where did you say 5.6? 5.6. Sorry, I said 5 or 6. 5 or 6. Okay. I don't deal in halvesies.
I was impressed. You bring up a good
Very
point.
specific number.
Councilmember
5.6.
brings up a good point. You know, 2019 is when we did that 50% increase for public safety. And from 2008 to 2019, everybody that served in these public offices around this dais, back then, they could say, hey, we never raised property taxes. Good for us. We never raised property taxes. And it fell on my city council when I was there, raised 50% because it didn't raise for almost, basically. And if you remember last year, property tax, basically, for last year and this year, raise.
I have to go 5%.
Yeah.
15, but no, I agree with what you're saying.
Philosophically, and that was one.
Yeah, we can look good and not raise property taxes for it, but capital investment just goes to. I mean, we've seen you have potholes and broken pipes.
Well, it's like we discussed the early part when you mentioned the fire truck, just as an example. So we prolonged the fire truck. There was a lot of maintenance costs associated with that, and then the cost of the replacement had gone up significantly. So we were way behind the power curve financially, because maybe optically, maybe we were thinking we don't want to spend that money right now. So, like when you're talking about transferring funds from different areas, that's an optics thing to me. Still spending the money, it's just from different sources. So we're all still paying. I think the obvious thing is none of us like to pay, but we're pretty comfortable using that analogy of the potholes, calling the city when there's a pothole. And and the cost of everything is going up. And I think all citizens understand that. Buy milk, they buy cheese, they buy eggs, they buy bread. Everything's going up. So we're getting ahead of it. And I think, Dave, you said some time ago, don't we plan for these things when we bring in a fire truck? That's what we're talking about here, planning ahead. But I think to that point, helping folks understand conceptually, yeah, what's going on. Like you said, why are we buying, you know, someone calls you and says, why are we buying more toys, paying more taxes on toys? Well, there's really specific things that are needing to be purchased. And I'm going to bet on the fleet fund, there's a lot of discussion on prioritization about what's going to be replaced. And so every once in a while, there might even be an argument.
There's heated,
I
discussion.
I could just imagine.
Warm discussion,
I mean, just peel back the layers, so when, and again, like warmer, I cannot say enough positive and good things about city staff and their understanding of this issue and their willingness to work with what I did. With that said, as I met with Jason specifically, as we go through that spreadsheet, we get to the end number of, I told Jason, hey, we're looking like 1.6-ish million. Like his face was like serious. He's like, we gotta have a discussion. I got that hook truck that needs to be done. I got a garbage truck. We have another ambulance. So that's when we started having the discussion, he and I, in my office, about, okay, like, we split out public because of the driving it. And we had a fleet committee meeting. Talk about this, what's happening. That happened down in Public Works. Like, I can remember being in the office discussing it. Like, it's concerning. And it's, staff is very aware what this meant.
When they do their best with,
because they understand
them too, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, if the council comes back and says, "Hey, this is the number we feel comfortable with," staff will work with that.
Just as an example, comically, but it's not. You can go down there to Public Works. I haven't seen it lately, but last year it seemed like follow a trail of hydraulic fluid down Forest Street right into Public Works because the garbage truck had gone out again. It was about weekly. You could follow that trail all the way down, and then staff would try and put it back together. And that they do their best, and that's I wasn't saying, see, now we need a new garbage truck. The point of that was we have good staff, and they do the best with what we got.
It's very rare that the garbage truck isn't pulled into one of the fleet bays every day. And I'm not even kidding you when I say that, just because of how much use they get and all the moving parts on them.
I do. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Ryan, I do have one thing. If you decide you want to got a little bit of time and switch subjects on you and present you an opportunity that we've got that would have a budget effect. It was literally the week of the mayor's budget presentation, but we haven't did it right now. Just if you got time tonight, want to hear about it. So
it was the other part of our public safety. When we noticed the meeting was fleet fund and public safety.
To just continue with Matt's thoughts on at least trying to capture information. On into transportation
last year.
But it seems like we've gone up between 3 to 5% yearly to try and capture that inflation. Having skipped last year and on this year, I mean, if you something to consider is maybe instead of going 15, go and capture last year's. Of course, now that I say that, obviously,
it's a problem. Well, the problem when you say that, we're now you're just basically telling the residents of Brigham City they're going to get a property tax increase every year, roughly about 5%.
They are. If inflation goes up about.
I think what's frustrating, council member.
Well, at least that's what's going to be proposed. That's what I should say.
Yeah, because the thing in the reality of the world that we live in, I mean, we all hope that we get a pay raise every year to help with cost inflation. Not everybody gets one.
I get it.
So we all have to deal with our own means and with the salaries that we're given, costs that we have to go affect. It hits us personally and everybody. And residents who are on fixed incomes, That's where this really hits home. Because they don't get a salary adjustment every year. They're on fixed income. They're stuck paying the budget is paycheck to paycheck or whatever.
Yeah.
So
Well,
the hard thing is, you gotta be careful how you,
well, that philosophy doesn't come from us, the government. That philosophy comes from citizens. 2019 in the public meetings. Overwhelmingly, just about every citizen that came there, and that room was packed with about 150, 200 people, that you guys should have been doing a little bit every year. We didn't have a 50%.
100% agree.
Yeah. But that's where the philosophy comes from, not from BJ or from staff. It's citizens.
And honestly,
The other,
Go ahead.
And the other comment that I received Tuesday night, it was Monday. Someone says to me, we're on this deep dive, and he says, where we live in is one thing, but the Brigham City's budget, if you look at it, what you guys proposed this year, go back 5 years. Doubled. 5 years. And they said, then he asked me, they said, just tell me what's changed in 5 years to warrant a 50% change. The thing I can say is that we have a better police and fire force. That's it. Fire time. Tyler does a great job. But the community is what they perceive and what they see. So if you go back a few years, your budget went from roughly $60 million to now you're asking for 109. And go.
remember there's a $31.5 million one-time project in the budget.
It's in the
So,
budget.
yep.
But communicate that to the average citizen and be asking.
Yeah.
It's these are the conversations that we get as elected officials.
Mhm.
You guys might not get them,
We get them. I'm sure they get them.
but it's tough out there. Glad I'm not running this year, but it's
But I'm not either.
sorry, Ryan. I got you. I support you. But
No, but
but it's
that's a
question.
great comment though, Dave. It's not but. You look back on
Where's
one of
your
the
money
slides here, you can that spike was exactly 4 years ago. Inflation of cost of vehicles, but it was everything. It was, I mean, we could say police. That's about when the war on police, when Salt Lake City handed their police department, and then they realized that they needed police, so they negotiated with the union. And the union says, that's fine, we'll come back for double the wage. They said yes, and then that rippled all across the state. So now we're not competing with just Perry and Tremont and Willard and Logan, because everybody increased their size, their draw. And this is just police. Fire was the same way. Frankly, so was Tyler's employees and Tom's. That inflation hit everything that the city uses. That's what's driving it. But on top of that, you got the bridge in there. So in about 18 months, you're going to see that the budget go down $30 million.
and I, you know,
We haven't had 100% inflation budget that's doubled.
the budget hasn't doubled exactly in 5 years, but there is a $31.5 million number in there. And that I see the public sees the total number.
That's all they look at.
And with our internal service funds, our transfers from utility funds, I'll tell you, there's a lot of numbers that are doubled up in a grand total budget number, that they're the same dollars of expenditure here that are going over here. The actual money that flows through the city is not the grand total budget. It's the way the accounting world forces us to account for things.
That's a great point.
And,
4 years
you know,
ago, the state auditor changed some accounting rules.
So if you're showing a $4 million, so 5 years ago, what was the transfer from the utility fund at 15%? 2.5, 3, almost $3 million bucks. And today, that number is $4.5 million. That number is a revenue and expenditure in two funds. We do a grand total budget with them together, it's doubled.
Okay, but that's not the answer to the question. Because that's an answer that you have internally as city staff. That's your knowledge. The city's not going to understand that. They won't get it. I'm not going to say they don't care. They just don't get it. So they're going to look at the perception of this right here. This is what everyone's talking about. That you want to increase property tax 50% so we can increase our fleet department. Well, then I was asked, So what are you buying? I thought the fire truck was already approved. That's, I know, but then if you go into the weeds with lease and stuff, that, I know.
20 years from now.
I know. That's
Oh.
the thing, it's kinda like.
Yep.
And it's. We're all in that group. You just shop on Amazon. You'll never go out.
By the way, the biggest piece of equipment the city owns is not in the lease payment. So, maybe just a little friendly reminder for those that might be around in the next 5 years. The ladder truck that the city owns was actually, we borrowed money and did a loan on it and paid it off over a 15-year period, and it is not in our internal service fund at all. There is no lease payments on it. When that truck is up for replacement, we will be talking about capital project money to purchase that truck, and it will be north of $2 million, and we will be talking to you in the next 5 years. So,
And long-terming, I mean, we all know the good point. It can be on the backs of the citizens of property tax, and we try and reduce that. That's the goal, is to reduce that by bringing industry in. And right now we're stymied because of electricity, being able to get more electricity here for that. So that leads to, you know, some of the things that we've talked about here recently, looking forward and forward thinking so that we have that, so we can still have economic development and bring the Niagaras and new cores in here so that our citizens don't see that increase as not even nearly as what we're going to see without economic development.
And over the years, I've seen big budget items that people don't see is us. We have to invest in things to maintain, but then we're also putting a big chunk of money into investing into future, right? And
Yeah, the loop, the 46 kV.
yeah,
loop line,
needing to do all of that.
yeah, the water line headed out that
And
direction. Yep.
My worry is that all of that is stuff that we vote on, and honestly, future city councils can't change it really. And so then our budget automatically goes up. And what we're doing is we're taking that from the actual running of the city. So we're having to find money to run the city because we just invested so many millions of dollars in the future. And my worry is that we're right now, because of the high inflation, because of high replacement costs, because of, you know, we're at that 25, 35 year needing to replace so much of our infrastructure. And we need to invest in the future. We're having a generation of the next 20 years having to pay for all of that.
No, you're absolutely
Right
right.
now.
That's why I call those projects generational.
And so,
You're exactly right.
and that's my worry, is there something that we have to limit on that future economic development big cost that we're permanently putting into and hoping that it comes.
I think
You know.
if you're talking about the bond specifically, you know,
That in general, and I, you know, like our power generation and things like that.
Yeah.
Everything put into it for us to be able to run in 20 years as we grow.
There are some projects, again,
And
the
so
KV, the
that-
water line,
That
but
scares me
yeah.
more than,
Penstock, that's not
Yeah.
economic development. I mean, it is, but it's not. That just had to be done because it's been 60 years since it's been put in. The power relocation above the pit, that's contractual. That was signed back in
1977.
77,
and
mid
so
70s. Yeah.
and I don't think the general public understands that when you do your budget and you guys are talking, you have those costs
Mhm.
put in, and it's an automatic increase in your budget
Right.
unless you take it. this
Mhm.
listing. And so when they say we don't lower anything, or when they feel like we're not trying to within certain boundaries, just like with the increase in gas and inflation, that's an automatic to your budget. So when you're going down 12%, and you're squeezing it in, you really are squeezing in a finite amount of money that you can actually.
Right.
And I think the general public needs to be aware that you're not just playing with $45 million. You're bound by past decisions of the council, by reality and stuff like that. And so when you're making cuts, it's not just like we're cutting here. It's we have to fund this. They don't really see the cut that you have to make, or
We don't fault, right?
the many things that the departments have to not get funded.
We don't fault anybody because
Yeah.
we know how busy everybody is, but it'd be wonderful if in this meeting, let's just take this one. They were full out. 75 people. Now we're more educated on the fleet fund and how it works.
Right.
And it's difficult just to echo Juliana Larson.
I can say this, if we're looking at 50% property tax increase.
You
okay,
said 15, right?
15.
Okay. Just make sure it didn't sound like
Yeah.
50.
Heard 50 twice.
But 1.5, just say it. If we're looking at a 15% increase and it was more than just fleet, I would be a little bit more interested to see because one thing I looked at, I hope by the time I leave city council, one thing I would love to see happen is that Chief Reyes is a new building. I think the city's at a point that you need a new station. I feel bad for him and his team sitting down there. Bothers me because now I see so many of them sitting over by 7-Eleven by the car wash. I get why you're there. I don't blame you. But I think if we look at
coffee.
good coffee. So I heard. But I look at the needs of the city and capital projects here in the near future, and I really think that this is just me talking. I think that's the next big project that the city needs to consider. So if you came back and said, look, we're going to do a 50% property tax, we'll put half over here to the fleet fund, and we'll put the other half over here to help in the fund to help get Chief Reyes a police station. I bet I can get the community to back it. I'll back it. I understand that because we are looking at the growth of the community and we are looking at future plans. Because at the end of the day, I just don't want to sit here one day and we got to pass a bond because we got a building came up, we got an opportunity for the police station to get a new building. Like, planning now. I'm not the finance guy, that's Tom, but
I think step one of that, you guys just recently did, a few months ago, is you adopted an impact fee that is starting to reserve some funding for a future police station, and we'll continue to look for sites and work on that. Most likely the city will have to issue a bond, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a general obligation bond, but
if you don't have to raise so much money because we find budgeted. At the end of the day, I think the community can. That's actually something that
and I think the difficult thing, the impact fees are an awesome step, and they'll help us start to kind of reserve a little bit of a nest egg to help. It's small. When you look at impact fees residentially versus industrially or commercially, we're in a little bit of a predicament right now, not being able to grow industrial commercially at a bigger size because of power. But if we were to land a few bigger companies, those numbers change in a really big hurry. And I think one thing, it'd be good, Tom can maybe get this prepared for our June 5th meeting if we have a work session before, whatever the council wants to do, or we can meet next week too. If you look at, you can look at economic development, and big economic development that's happened in Brigham City as compared to what the council has done with, this would be a 6th property tax rate increase in the last 7 years. Economic development has paid a lot more dollars towards increased fleet, increased costs in public safety than property taxes. And we can show you that on a graph. And I'm not trying to downplay a property tax, and I'm not trying to downplay $450,000 in property tax, but I will tell you that those are small, very, very, very small dollars over the last 7 years. If you compare it to us being able to do what we've done, and really that's driven by economic development and the growth of the city.
100%. The property tax is kind
Everyone.
for kids. Harder when you're talking about family, a mom who on income raising 3 kids on. So it's just tough. Mrs. Larson mentioned that same thing. We do some, and then yeah, it's kind of shares this some, and then and 100% she's correct. And taking that stuff into again, I'd like to where I'm more comfortable. That was an hour ago. 5. We did an hour. 5, yeah. 5.67. No, I mean, and that's the same. That's where I'm headed at with the point on all of this. Yeah, we need a little bit of help in there. Do we need to jump on that? Now, my mind. So that's where I'm at.
I got a question for you, Derek. Derek, as you sit in your office and you talk with yourself, because we know you do, you go back and forth. 450 is the wish list, or the. I mean, what is your? We can survive with this number, kind of. Can I ask you? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd say I think we can live with 250 to 275 and still get what we need done in the upcoming budget. I mean, and with my caveat for my third repeat that we're making a large assumption that 2% is going to work in that fleet, and just a promise that we'll talk to you in next year's budget.
Well, sure, and none of us like to go through this with the looming property tax. I mean, we all live in the city, and it hits all of us and our family and friends. So,
I didn't really drill down on the number. I think the number you're looking for is 7.12.
Number 5.
Yeah, 3.14.
I just can't see that number.
I mean, if we make somewhere in the middle, that's if we were at, so we're at 450,000 right now.
That's what. Correct me if I'm wrong,
Ryan,
Tom.
7.5.
Exactly 450 in property tax. Yeah, and that's still an estimate until we get the certified tax rate, see the new growth, all of that.
So if it was half of that, it was 7.5. Each family would be hit with, instead of $50, it'd be $27 a year. What we're talking about.
Yeah, again, back of the net.
Right. And I know every house is different, but
We make an adjustment. We would go and adjust percentage in the fleet fund.
Go ahead, Tom, on that.
Yeah.
Or there's always an or.
That's why.
The or is we lower that property tax to, let's say, $275,000. The city council can talk to us about sales tax. You want to get a little more aggressive on sales tax, and the mayor has in his budget. You want to get more aggressive on ambulance fee revenue than the mayor has in his budget. There's, we can
give you options.
We could come with 4 or 5 options for adjustment. Leave fleet at that 2%. And by the way, that would probably be the staff recommendation. Let's leave the fleet at 2%, and let's dig in and make a couple estimates or guesstimates on, And by the way, Tom's got about 40 more days of data on reality since the mayor gave you guys the budget. So we can double back on sales tax again, look at ambulance fee revenue. Those are just the big drivers in our general fund. You know, we could look at building permit revenue, something like that. You know, there's 4 or 5 things we could look at and be ready to talk about in the next meeting. So
You guys want another work session put together? I mean, I would. All the information to me is good information. So, well, and I don't know if we do that after or before we get the county's numbers, tax rate. That's the only thing in my head I'm wondering about. I don't think an hour before city council would be enough, but if we don't have the numbers from the certified tax rate, I'm not sure.
we're not going to have them before June 5th.
We know what we're talking.
Maybe. It could be that day. So
You got news, Spencer?
Tom would always give them to me on the 7th when he was over there.
Now I understand why Derek called me
every day.
What was the other thing you wanted to switch gears on?
You ready for that?
Yeah, go ahead. If you guys
We can schedule first.
I think we want. Yeah.
Is the council good with 2, with the caveat we come back with 3 or 4 different options for other revenue things in our next meeting?
with the goal to getting the property tax.
That's 26. Yeah.
Okay.
So
So
let me
I-
say inflation.
I guess one question, just process-wise, Councilman Mayor Pro Tem Smith, if we are going to not have a meeting on the 19th, we have got to get the public notices out for 6 public hearings on June 5th this next week. So we can obviously have a budget work session again on the 29th, but we've kind of got to make a decision tonight, not specific numbers, but hey, we're going to vote on tentative budget on June 5th, get everything ready to go for the public hearings for that night. I couldn't hear you. Sorry, Councilmember Jensen.
I was thinking, I know we got Juneteenth, what if you did a meeting the day before,
I know our city attorney is not sitting here next to me, but it would be highly recommended to not take action on a budget outside of a normal council night. So, or hold public hearings outside of a normal council night. And that,
as though we're trying to on the app.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying that our city attorneys.
names here.
Let's prep up for the 5th, those public hearings and whatnot. We can make adjustments after we need to.
We stay here all night on June 5th too.
Yeah.
So,
So let's do that.
So next week,
We meet on the
we
29th?
don't have a,
We don't have a scheduled meeting. If we want to get together, we certainly.
We're focused on the 5th because
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Notices for the 5th out this weekend.
public notice, the public hearings.
we'll get everything prepped for all the public hearings on June 5th. And then, and obviously if council wants to chat more, we can meet multiple times next week as well, if we need to.
You guys
Okay,
now
so-
29th.
29th and the 5th,
Put it down.
29th work session, the 5th is the council.
Yep.
I'm fine with this.
29th would be the same start time.
But I think one thing for the 29th, I continually heard is, we'll prep those few items, and then I think the council wants to see some data on, how does this affect, Tom's done a really good job of taking 5 different averages of taxpayers, and what does that look like? We'll get you some graphs, usually name some.
My only
something that-
request is that
Iron Man.
Captain America.
It's usually the 5 of you, 6 of you sitting up here home, so.
Oh, really? Then you just gotta figure out who's who.
just one question about the fleet fund. I think it's interesting that we have trailers and air compressors and stuff in there. Has that always been that way? Is that the easiest way to function through those? I mean, an air compressor to me isn't a huge
Be a minimum value
purchase. Yeah, I guess so. I didn't know, like the cemetery had a weed sprayer. They were $3 a month.
Yeah, so they're ever evolving.
I think there's two ways.
What did you say? Did you say it's always revolving?
Ever evolving.
Okay, all right.
I think
Sometimes we've had things go in that's definitely fleet. Other times it's, I understand it had been purchased previously by fleet, no longer going forward. But yeah.
really the logic of it, of those items that may not necessarily be get in there and push on the gas and steer the steering wheel, is really our best way to make sure we're accounting for this has a useful life. It's going to run out, and let's generate the money to replace it when it's done. And you know,
I mean, Howard's got a trailer on. Right now it's from 1984.
Yeah.
We buying it.
We should have put a 42-year life cycle on it, but we missed it.
Are you like, okay, you're gonna have $7 every month for the next 40 years to pay for this?
Yeah, and it's really a tracking thing too, because all of that requires maintenance at times. And so Robin's question of, hey, the trailer needs new tires, the trailer needs bearings packed, resealed. That goes down to fleet. They have an electronic system that says this trailer's number 1792, and they put that in there, and that department ends up paying the time and effort, the maintenance on that trailer. It's really that ongoing maintenance. So yes, our fleet guys do repairs on air compressors that are in a fire truck or in the fire station. That, you know, it's really that maintenance element, and then a good accounting tracking, making sure, frankly, Brigham City knows everything that it owns too. So
no, I just thought it was interesting. Some of those things really wouldn't have.
And you started your presentation, and we talked about, we've had this fleet internal service for 20, plus years, and it was because it is more efficient and cost effective. It would be nice to, like, if we didn't have this internal service and sent all of our vehicles out, how much more that would cost.
I think the very best example is one that we are living, frankly. So you guys have noticed we're replacing these Dodge Durangos that are police vehicles, and we can quantify this if you guys would like in a future meeting. But the Dodge Durangos that are being replaced with F-150s were the city's essentially first large attempt at an actual external lease program. So those 28 Durangos were actually a lease from a vendor. And at the end of that lease period, which was 4 years, Brigham City had a purchase option to buy out the vehicles outright, which we enacted on all 28. The reason why we did, frankly, and not re-up the lease, is we signed a lease agreement for 28 vehicles over 4 years, 7 or 8 a year, at an initial internal rate of return. So what were we paying somebody else's dollars to run a lease program for us? Started out about 3.5%. In year number 5, when we were ready to redo that, we were looking at an 18-19% number to continue with that lease. So if you look at that, what we're doing internally is we're using city dollars, city money, taxpayer money to pay back to the citizens of the city what you would pay a lease company, which honestly, there's not as many government lease companies as there was 5 years ago. They've actually really started to not be as many out there, but that, if you're doing a lease payment, you're paying an internal rate of return to a leaseholder. Somebody's backing that cash. What we're doing inside Brigham City, paying ourselves that money. And that's really the whole, I could...
With interest costs, if we had buy these loan, get a
Loan,
loan.
yeah.
We
Loans,
would be paying,
loans would be awful. Hopefully we weren't
Yeah.
ever in a situation
yeah,
that we'd have to do that. But it's, yeah, I mean, with any and we talked about, we did the other day, it's like, let's look at the lease option again for, a vehicle that we don't spend a bunch of money outfitting, that somebody like me might drive around, that doesn't need any bells and whistles, just a vehicle. You look at the cost of the vehicle. You go out in the market. Tom did this with 2 vehicles in the last month. But what can I get the same vehicle for on a lease payment? We put it in our spreadsheet and do our internal stuff. We're still kicking it their butt doing it internally, and that internal rate of return, or that 7% we're asking you for now, is still cheaper than a lease payment with some company. So,
Hand-me-downs?
all the equipment, we do lots of hand-me-downs. So there are vehicles in, Tom showed you one sheet of about 36 different sheets that make up all of the fleet fund. There are departments that just inherit a vehicle. They don't make the lease. So department Tom Cooper's buys has 8 years on a F-150. Probably use something older, but anyway, 8 years they drive this vehicle. They pay it off in its useful life, but we got a department that needs a vehicle once or twice a week. Vehicle's been paid for. It's done. It'll get moved to, let's say, IT. That's the reality. Our IT folks have a vehicle that they drive around. They're not making a lease payment on that, but they will never get a new one either. So that won't be replaced. It's just sitting here in the parking lot for them to use a couple times a week. Vehicle was paid for, paid off. We've bought a new one for these guys, but we got this thing sitting down here that gets a little tiny bit of use. And they don't get a ask for a priority. Hey, we need a new. They get a new hand-me-down, but they don't get a brand new one ever.
Yes. Okay. That's all part of the fleet management.
Yep.
Already not purchasing all new cars all at the same time. That's not going to
Yep.
Fleet management.
It takes a lot of time. It's fun. Mayor's opinionated sometimes.
I mean,
I did.
do we have enough?
5.67.
Space and mechanics and stuff, big increase.
Um,
Have we had to increase?
Yeah, Mr. Pugsley had something else to go to. I've had a couple conversations with some of our mechanics in the last few years, and they've been talking to us. The city council might feel a little, hey, we just sprung this on you. To be 100% honest with you, we've been talking about how are we going to fix our fleet problem for 5 years. And, we're asking you to take a stab at it right now. But I think the real answer to your question, Robin, is our mechanics that are out there are spending so much time fixing old equipment. They're looking for a way to get ahead. And we're taking a small stab at it with what we're asking you guys to do right here. So it's, really about keeping stuff in service. And Tyler's not lying. You drive down there every day of the week, you're going to see one of our garbage trucks after it's run pulled in there to get worked on. So
Just for the record, you screen stuff on.
sorry. Our form of government.
It's just part of being here.
So what else you got?
Are you ready for me to switch subjects?
Yeah, if everybody's okay, so the 29th at 6, right? Everyone's okay with that.
Yeah, I've asked the recorder to notice it.
6 o'clock on the 29th.
Yes, sir.
About the 5th, are we starting early at
Is
5?
that,
I think you can decide next week.
Yeah, I think that'll be,
Well,
Or is that
1 week,
that doesn't
no.
impact,
on the
We
5th?
got to decide. I say you probably ought to just notice a 5 o'clock work meeting, and if we don't need it, we don't need it.
what was that, sorry?
5 o'clock work section on
On the 5th?
session on the
Okay.
5th. Now I'm doing what Tom. Okay, we ready? Yep. Go. So, literally the week the mayor did his budget presentation, Perry City city manager approached me with a proposal, and we have been talking with Perry City over the past about 3 weeks, month, on an option, and I want to talk to the city council about it because it would have a future budget implication. So let me back up just a second. So Brigham City right now has one essentially full-time building inspector, and he's also our building official, but he historically has been working between $8,000 and $10,000 worth of overtime, frankly, every year for about 8 years here at the city. So we budget him to work overtime every single pay period to keep up with the building inspection demands just here in our city. I've asked him for many budget years to, hey, if you decide you're done working overtime, you just want to work your 40 hours a week, you need to provide me notice so we can get an idea. And about 2 years ago, he said, I'm wanting to back off my overtime. I need some help. So at that point in time, we immediately started to train another building inspector. He's in his 4th year essentially of his certifications. And so he's got one more test, commercial electrical, and he'll be a fully certified building inspector. So, and there's 2 reasons that we've done this. One, obviously, we feel like our building official / building inspector is going to need some help as we continue to grow. He obviously has told me he needs help. And it's just not something we've been able to, get in a budget so far. Our one guy that is certified does help him as much as he can. But he also has his other full-time job that he's doing here at the city. So Perry City reached out to me and asked if Brigham City would be willing to potentially look at a contract for us to handle their building inspections internally. Most recently, Perry City, backing up a few years, Perry City was contracting their building inspections through Box Elder County. And then they, about 18 months ago, made a change to have a third-party contractor do those building inspections. And there were some issues with that third-party contractor. The person that was frankly doing it for them took a new job, and that contractor doesn't have a building inspector that actually works for him now. So Perry City reached out and wondered if we'd be willing to enter into some sort of a mutual agreement for us to assist them with their building inspection. So essentially, the kind of the offer on the table right now, and obviously, I met with their city manager again this morning on the subject. The offer is that Perry City will essentially pay 50% of a full-time employee's wage, and Brigham City to pay the other 50% of a full-time employee's wage. We enter into an interlocal agreement with Perry City, and have, be able to. I think what's most exciting on our side about that is, one, we need more help right now with building inspections within our city. We got a guy that's been working a lot of hours of overtime for many, many years, and said I'm ready to start working less overtime. And then I think the second cool opportunity for Brigham City is, we've got an opportunity to have a full-time employee be paid for by another jurisdiction 50% of their wage, and be able to, not take that essentially full hit right now. So what I'm asking is, as I continue to talk with Perry City and negotiate, how does the council feel about, maybe making an adjustment? We could do it later in June. Obviously, budget adjustments really quick after you adopt the budget sometimes aren't the most comfortable thing for the council, but I'll get into the numbers. So the fully burdened rate of the employee, the fully burdened wage is roughly $135,000 with wages and benefits, everything associated, cost of that full-time employee. So we'd be looking at half of that. We'd have to come up with money, our own revenue, and then obviously the remainder of that coming from Perry City.
So how much are we gonna save from not paying overtime?
Rough, 12 to 15,000 is about it. So
we'll save roughly $12,000.
Yep.
Basically, we've got to come up with the extra.
About $60,000, and we'd bring in another full-time employee on here at City Hall, and they would be, just rough numbers, were about 500 hours a year is what the third-party contractor was spending in Perry City for building inspections. So that's not 50. I realize that's not 50% of a full-time employee's wage. through the negotiation, I'm doing it here in a public meeting, which is a little bit odd, but through that negotiation, we have a cost of a vehicle, which we've spent 2 hours talking about here tonight, and fuel and everything associated with the cost of that vehicle. So that's essentially what we'd be asking Perry's to pay that full 50% of that employee's wage to help cover the cost of the $50,000 vehicle and the fuel associated with that. So anyway, any thoughts, questions, concerns, and I guess timing thoughts? That would just be the second one. Yep. We only have one. That's the guy that I want to move up. Yeah. That would create a vacancy in a public works department position that we'd have to replace.
Perry City would be paying, and we would end up.
No, they would just pay 50% of the wage, of the ongoing wage of the employee, and realizing that only 500 hours a time, which Perry's going to grow, Breeden's going to grow, what that allocation looks like. I don't want a nickel and dime every year. So the offer is essentially, hey, will you pay 50% of that employee's wage?
Why don't we? The vehicle, why? For sure, the mileage.
That's a fleet question we could get into some details with. Mileage would be interesting. Obviously, building inspectors are essentially, God, you're going to have to help me, you walked out.
Maybe you have to go back because
The building inspectors have a badge on them, and they need to show up in an official city vehicle.
Okay.
So
you have to ask your attorney, because what happens with that individual Brigham City vehicle goes to Perry, their pocket gets in a car accident, or who's responsible?
we'll have an indemnification clause in the interlocal agreement. Those are in all of them that we have. So I am not sure. Well, we're doing it right now. Our fire marshal has been serving Perry City for longer than I have been here through an interlocal agreement. So, yep. We're a full-time fire service, ambulance, and fire marshal for Perry City, and have been for many, many years. So
This is a little different outside the norm.
it's actually pretty common, very common for smaller cities.
No, I'm saying in Brigham. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I'm talking Brigham.
Yeah.
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 We're not necessarily.
We're committing that he will cover all inspections in Perry City, whatever they are, and will continue to monitor over time if they get to, an amount that's, there's plan reviews associated with that and all of those types of things. It's not just going out and doing a 4-way inspection. We're looking at plan reviews.
Everything would be here.
Yep.
Like we would be paying.
We wouldn't really have any printing costs. It's all just email. Yeah. Yep. And that's why I'm essentially asking him for the 50% instead of just 500 hours a year is more around like 30%, frankly, than a full-time employee's and time. And that's why we're really asking for the 50% to include the cost of a vehicle and the fuel. And,
Would there be some actual agreement related time too? So if you're going over that 50% in Perry overtime charge,
we could do an overtime, whatever the right term is. Yes. Yeah.
in my experience, when people historically in an organization have overtime, even when you increase the manpower, oftentimes the overtime also increases.
Yeah.
So I think adding more manpower might decrease overtime. Doesn't always do that.
We should just prohibit it.
Well, I'm sure you have a process by which you clear
We do.
overtime, prior approval type
Yep,
thing. But
we do. Yeah, we could put an overtime element in there.
The easiest way to do it is just, okay, in Brigham City, you work Mondays and Wednesdays. Tuesday and Thursdays, you're over at Perry. On the drive, so that's the easiest, to me, that's the easiest.
We could look at that. It's just building inspections are,
I don't know that.
yeah, they're just,
that way.
Yep.
It is hard.
But 50% down. If it's an employee we already have,
It'd be a promotion with, well, actually, it wouldn't be a promotion, it'd just be a lateral within our city. So it would be an increased wage for this employee.
not changing the job.
We would have to replace him in the job he's leaving of Public Works. Yes. So, yeah, we're adding a full-time employee with 50% of the money coming from Perry. We're adding one half, really, of a full-time person. Yep. So. Yeah.
Yeah, just like it's a domino.
I think really my question, if you're comfortable with it, we're gonna ask you to actually put it in. We'll talk about, I'll give you specific numbers and detail on 29th and come up with a couple different options for that additional roughly $60,000 of expense. We'll dive into the details on that. 60 grand, I mean, I think we can go through, we'll look at sales tax again, can repeat myself, we'll look at those things that I talked about
That's where
before.
it gets ugly. Raise taxes some, fees on someone, hire an additional. Everything gets.
Yeah, one of the, obviously one of the simple things we could definitely look at is building permit revenue. We are very cautious with making sure that building permit revenues are not paying for ongoing costs and maintenance of things that are not related to building inspections. But on something like this, we're adding an employee to take care of increased inspections that generate building permit revenue. I would be comfortable, council can speak here, but we added that $60,000 frankly to building permit revenue. So we do.
No.
Or they can go.
Yep.
Now, this is just an alternative. I'm sure you've thought about this while you talk to yourself in the way home. What if it was just our employee and we hired out and they paid us per inspection kind of thing? Is that more paperwork, or is that not something they're interested in? That seems like that'd be easy to track versus, oh, hey, you spend 20% of your time here or there. That's what the county does with a lot of places. They, the small towns out and around, they do the building inspections and permits and stuff. So
I'll be honest with you, that's exactly why Perry City quit doing what they were doing with the county. So my guess is if that's our offer, they'll go a different direction.
okay.
So you got plan
Full-time, adding a new.
You have plan review too, which is really hard to quantify. Not every building to look at the plan is the same, doesn't take the same amount of time. And frankly, that's a flaw with that logic that the county was doing, is when you're looking at a set of plans on a 1,200 square foot home versus a 4,000 square foot home, the amount of time is significantly different. So.
Thing is, it provides us, helps us with a future issue. We can eliminate $12,000 a year, but if we're going to eliminate $12,000 a year, on the back end, it's going to cost us $1,000 to do it. Help them next door.
And I'm looking at it in a way that my building official has told me I need help, and I can't afford to have him walk out the door, frankly, and I need to get him help. And I've got another jurisdiction saying I'll help you pay for half of that initially. So that's how I'm viewing it. And that, yeah,
Our officials getting in a few years of retirement.
4 or 5 years, and that's the other cool opportunity. We've got a guy coming, but we're 4 or 5 years away from having to replace our building official with a retirement, frankly. And this is a way to get a guy in right now, getting to work and getting his feet wet, moving. So we'll throw it in there and give you some. Okay. Anyway. Perfect. Oh, I mean,
That's okay.
maybe a little with the building inspector, we'll go into detail on property tax rates and really dive into those different options if we pull that property tax down of other ways we can balance budget.
Anything else? All right. Motion. All right, then I need a motion to adjourn. Moved.
All those in favor?
I,
Oh, I thought there was a second.
second, and I.
That was Smith on the motion, Troxel on the second. All were in favor. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Mayor, for a second, I can't,
I'm not
he
ready
asked
to
you.
go. Adjourn. Yeah, we had a call to order. With that. Right. And the scarf.
You told him to. Oh, I like that. Got an orange shirt.
Which holiday?
He related to Norton?
Oh, all right.
Yeah. He's a good guy. He's a really good friend.
What? Keep flipping?
Oh, I talked to him. Yeah. Last. All over it.
He would much rather.
After you already discussed with you, I need to lower my load. and you go, how about we?
No.
Oh, hey, yeah, I didn't know his son. Yeah, I always liked Norm. You knew Norm, though.
I never did.
Oh, you run around the family then. He's a good guy.
He's the reason I bought the home.
Another home. I'd already had some always done that. Leaving this message. What's it on?
We put it in the budget. We're waiting for July. It's in his budget.
That's all I need.
I know.
We're no longer.
He was fine last time I thought, but that's been whatever the last conference.
Somewhere, it's 146. I'll wait on it.
Maybe he just goes through the motion. Not usually the last, folks.